Welcome back. Today I'm going to share with you why the only way to end corruption and solve the world's problems is through spiritual evolution. In the previous solo podcast that I posted a couple of weeks ago, I argued that there's 4 paths that humanity can take to overthrow the system of control and solve the world's problems. There's the path of violence, which nobody is recommending, of course, but it is the path that humanity has taken over and over and over up to this point. There's the path of politics and policy change. There's the path of grassroots efforts. And then there's the path of individual and collective spiritual evolution. And I argued that the 4th path is the only path that will successfully allow us to end corruption, solve the world's problems, and create an enlightened society. I explained that the only way for us to not need outer governance, which requires systems of power that always end up corrupted, the only way for us to break that cycle is to evolve spiritually to a point where we can be governed from within ourselves, and we don't need an outside structure of authority to control us and make sure that we're not infringing upon each other's rights or behaving in ways that are destructive to ourselves and society. I received a few comments questioning the practicality of this, and particularly this comment, which states, "This sounds like anarchy." And I'd like to respond to that comment today. And we're going to dive into why spiritual evolution is the only path that will lead to an enlightened society. Right now, if we were to try to be self-governed, it would result in anarchy, as it has in the past. And actually, I would argue that if you go far enough back in the past where anarchy reigned, the institution of government was the next enlightened step for that society. If we go back to the times thousands of years ago when people were just killing and stealing and raiding, taking whatever they wanted for themselves, you could kill someone in an alleyway and nobody would ever know, to where we are now, where we do have systems of governance that hold people accountable and there's consequences for violating someone else's rights, that's a huge evolutionary leap. We don't want to go back to the time of anarchy. And that's why I'm saying that the only way for us to reach a state where we can be self-governed, where we don't need that outer system of control that, while it serves a good purpose in society, always ends up corrupted, we have to evolve spiritually. That is the key step. We have to expand our level of spiritual awareness and integration. We're going to take a step back and we're going to look at the process of spiritual evolution as a whole, where we've come from and where we're headed. There's a text that I really enjoy. It's a channel text called The Law of One. It's actually a massive work spanning, I think, 4 volumes that go into the metaphysics of how the universe works. One of the things that The Law of One explains in great metaphysical detail is the process of evolution of consciousness, starting from the creation, or the point at which Source expanded itself out into the universe, and following that journey of evolution back to our eventual reunification with Source. This process has been echoed time and time again by near-death experiencers who have also seen this exact same process of evolution of consciousness. What the Law of One explains is that in our evolutionary journey back towards Source, we go through 7 densities of consciousness. So the first density is that of the elements: air, water, earth, and fire. And this is when evolution was happening, when stars and planets were forming over how many billions of years. The second density of consciousness is when creation becomes aware. And this is where we see simple life forms, all the way from bacteria to plants to many animals, are in the second density of consciousness. They have developed an awareness of their environment. They can interact with their environment, but they're not necessarily self-aware yet. The third density of consciousness is where self-awareness is developed. And you can see between each of these stages of consciousness, a huge evolutionary leap happens. To go from rock and water, which is in a pure state of blissful being and not individuated at all, into a plant or an animal, which is now an individuated point of awareness that can interact with its environment. It can respond to the sunlight. It can respond to others of its kind. And then it's another huge leap from that state of awareness into self-awareness, which is quite obviously where humanity is at in some intelligent animals like dogs, dolphins, probably. I mean, there could be countless numbers of animals who have developed or are in the process of developing self-awareness. Self-awareness is where the ego develops, the separate sense of self. And this is a necessary step in the process of the entire spiritual awakening journey in which we are awakening back into our reunification with Source. In order to awaken to ourselves as the great self, we have to develop a sense of self. And so it's a huge and wonderful leap in the evolutionary process for a being to develop self-awareness. But along with that comes a lot of messiness as evidenced in the world around us. When we view ourselves as separate from each other, it causes all kinds of problems, from illusions of lack to violence, thinking that we're better or worse than others. And that's why we see all the turmoil. It really is our ego, our sense of being an individuated sense of self, of feeling cut off from each other and from our source, that has caused all of the issues that we see in the world. And it is just part of this stage of evolution that we are in. According to Law of One and many near-death experiencers, we are on the verge of evolving into the next density of consciousness, which is the fourth density, or the density of love and oneness. And this is where the boundaries between our sense of self and another's sense of self start to dissolve, and we start to develop an awareness that you experience the same I amness, the same me-ness that I do. There's only one I am presence in the universe, and we are all part of that. When we reach this level of consciousness, the problems in the world will dissolve, because who wants to fight against someone else when they realize that that other person is just another aspect of themselves? Of course, if you're me and I'm you, then I want to make sure you're fed and taken care of and treated the exact same way that I would want to be treated. Evolving from third density consciousness into fourth density consciousness is simply an expansion of the sense of self that we developed in third density consciousness to include all conscious beings in the universe. Like, everything is now a part of my sense of self. We are all one. And that's going to be the most important step to provide context for what we're going to talk about in the rest of this podcast. But beyond the fourth density, I'll just briefly mention that fifth density is the density of wisdom, sixth density is the density of balancing love and wisdom, and seventh density is where we reunite with Source. We can go into all of that in greater depth in future videos if you would like, but for now we're going to focus on the evolutionary leap from third density to fourth density. This is why I'm saying that spiritual evolution is the only answer for the problems that we're facing in the world. It is the next step for humanity. Every form of government that we have tried up to this point, well, it was a huge step in the right direction to institute consequences for actions, rather than letting anarchy reign supreme. Every form of governance that we have ever tried up to this point has failed. It doesn't matter if it's a monarchy, an oligarchy, a democratic republic, it always becomes corrupt and it fails. Why? Because from the grand scheme of a spiritual perspective spanning all the densities from first to seventh, we in third density are in a relatively unevolved place. And that's not a bad thing at all. It's a beautiful unfoldment of the awakening of consciousness. And this is just where we're at. We're like spiritual toddlers. And so you have spiritual toddlers trying to govern spiritual toddlers. That's what we're doing in third density. We have everybody creating society from a very low level of consciousness overall, comparatively. And so, of course, we continue to create more problems. The solution for this, of course, is for us each to evolve spiritually to the point where we can not only see and understand, but experience the truth. What is truth? Truth is not a set of beliefs as some religions would propose. Truth is much more simple and universal than that. Truth is simply what exists. Truth is reality. What is real? What is there? And the higher up in the density scale of consciousness we evolve, the more capacity we have to perceive and experience reality, experience truth. And the more that we can experience reality and truth, experience the universe as it actually is, the more that we can create societies that are in alignment with that. And without getting too deep into the weeds here, because we could do a whole series of podcasts diving into what is truth and what is reality, what I can present to you today is the base underlying teaching of all of the world's major religions, spiritual teachers, ascended masters, respected channeled texts, mystics, poets, artists, near-death and spiritual experiencers. They all say the same thing. Reality is that we are all aspects of the one great consciousness. So reality is a recognition of oneness. And the way that we experience and express that oneness is through love. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. Because we are all God and we are all one. Here's a few of my favorite quotes that express this truth so beautifully. All love is expansion. All selfishness is contraction. Love is therefore the only law of life. He who loves lives. He who is selfish is dying. Therefore, love for love's sake, because it is the only law of life, just as you breathe to live. From Vedanta. You are me and I am you. Isn't it obvious that we are? Buddhism. There is but one spirit, and all beings are expressions of it. Realize your true essence as this spirit, and love naturally flows toward all creation. Hindu mysticism. Love abounds in all things, excels from the depths to beyond the stars. It is lovingly disposed to all things. Love is the root of creation, God's nature. Christian mysticism. Love is the most powerful and still the most unknown energy of the world. Someday, after mastering the winds, the waves, the tides, the gravity, we shall harness, for God, the energies of love. Then, for the second time in the history of the world, man will have discovered fire. From Christian mysticism. And that someday is today. The someday is this spiritual evolution from third to fourth density, this precipice that we are on today. The whole moon and the entire sky are reflected in one dewdrop on the grass. From Zen Buddhism. Like waves rising and falling in the ocean, all things arise and dissolve in that one divine presence. In that realization, there is only love. From Advaita Vedanta. In the state of oneness, you see only the love that unifies and beautifies all. From Kriya Yoga. Love is the bridge between you and everything. From Sufism. God is without end, and his unity fills the universe. There is nothing outside of him, and everything is one in him. From Kabbalah. The human soul is a lamp of God, lit from the light of his own essence. In all things, there is one spark, one essence that is connected to the whole. Also from Kabbalah. The soul is in God and God in the soul, as the fish is in the sea and the sea in the fish. From Christian mysticism. I could go on and on and on. It would take hundreds of books to contain all of these quotes from people who have had this direct experience, or who have come to it through philosophy, understanding the laws of the universe. We are all one, and the practical working out of that oneness is love. The way that we both experience the oneness and express the oneness is love. We could say that spiritual evolution then is consciousness expansion, the ability to understand and experience the truth of reality as it actually is. Both are important. The mental understanding that we are all one, and the practical experience of that oneness. To know and embody the truth that all is one magnificent divine expression. When you reach this level of awareness, You naturally fulfill the great commandment to love your neighbor as yourself. You view each person with equal value, not placing yourself either higher or lower than anyone else, but viewing all with equal importance and treating all as if they were you, as you would want to be treated, the golden rule. It's all so very, very simple. Treat others as you would want to be treated. This is the law of one, and it is the law by which the entire universe functions. And when we evolve to the point where we can perceive and embody this, the problems of the world will disappear as quickly as we can come to this realization and embodiment. If we had a collective awakening overnight, the problems of the world would disappear overnight. But if we collectively awaken slowly over time, which we are doing, we will experience more turmoil in the process, but we will slowly root out corruption. We will come up with innovative solutions to the world's problems. We will end violence. Little by little, these things will happen as we come into a higher state of awareness. Now let's make this practical. Okay, if we were to reach, and when we reach this level of spiritual awareness, what practical effects would it have on society? And again, these things could happen overnight or they can happen little by little, depending on how quickly we evolve. I have 5 practical results of spiritual evolution that would allow us to create an enlightened society. I'm sure there are more, but these are the first 5 things that come to my mind. First, spiritual evolution would stop the violence. It would stop the wars, and it would stop 99% of situations in the world that require violence or force very quickly. If we collectively understand that we are one with our neighbor, then we can have no enemy. Any violence performed against another would be seen as violence against ourselves, which would be unthinkable. So instead of going to war, using force, using our ego to try to overpower other people and get them to do what we want, we would sit down and talk it out and come up with practical solutions. The situations that often lead to violence, fighting over the world's resources, would be easily solved because we would understand that, oh, you are me and I am you, so I want you to have your needs provided for. Why would I hoard resources from you? Nothing less than having every person adequately provided for would be accepted. Number 2, spiritual evolution would allow us to be self-governed. We've already touched on this, but it's a big point. When we understand that we are one with our neighbor, that anything we do to our neighbor, we are doing to ourselves, we won't need an outer system of control to force us to treat our neighbors well, to not violate their rights, to not do things that are damaging to society, because we won't want to do those things to another aspect of ourselves. Spiritual evolution, point number 3, would allow us to create authenticity and mutual respect. A spiritually evolved person is secure in themselves and in their relationship with others, understanding that we are all a divine fractal of source. It's very hard to personally offend a person who is spiritually evolved. Because when you have an awareness of your own divinity, you don't need anybody else's approval to make you feel good about yourselves. You can allow other people to have their opinions, to express themselves in the way that's authentic to them without it being a personal offense against you. And so this type of an atmosphere allows authenticity and differences between people, ironically enough, to flourish because nobody is going to be offended by somebody else's expression. An enlightened society would place a high value on integrity and authenticity because truthfulness builds trust. With each individual fully accepted as a divine expression of source, people would feel free to express themselves openly. Deception that often divide people would be done away with. Differences in thought and opinion would be encouraged and not viewed as a threat to one's own way of thinking. This leads me to my 4th point, which is that spiritual evolution would allow us to provide for ourselves through either cooperation or manifestation or a combination of the two. This would allow us to naturally become less and less dependent on government systems to provide us with food, medical care, clothing. An aspect of spiritual evolution is recognizing your own divine power, and part of that is realizing that you can manifest anything that you need from within yourself and your surrendered relationship with the universe. so that you're not living in a state of fear and lack and need. In number 5, the natural outflowing of the first 4 points is that spiritual evolution would allow us to work together and come together and receive divine inspiration, each of us to express authentically, to come forward with our innovative ideas, to work together to create a system of cooperation, rather than such individualistic independence, but yet so dependent on outer systems of control. What if we all came together and created our own solutions to our problems? We all stepped forward with what we could offer the world and benefited each other in return. A system like that would allow us to solve the world's biggest problems, rather than looking to a government to do it for us. Up until this point in human history, we have not reached the level of spiritual development necessary to create a society like this. And so the idea of world peace and living in peace and harmony and creating an enlightened society has been seen as naive and idealistic. Anyone who has worked on any sort of project, anybody who is any kind of artist will tell you there has to be a vision. The vision is imperative. It's going to take strong leaders with unwavering belief, willing to work through the turmoil that it will take us to get to this place, willing to keep believing through all of the upheaval that we're going through, willing to put up with the ego nature of the human race as each one of us continues the very messy evolution process. And I think that one of the most important things that we can each do if we want to talk about practical takeaways from this is we can create a strong vision. We need a strong shared vision of what an enlightened society could look like. So let's create a vision right now. Just imagine for a moment with me. We could be a society of people, a global society of people, living in cooperation with each other rather than competition. Not all competition is bad. A good sports game can be fun for some. I've been told. I don't personally get into sports myself, but some people really enjoy friendly competition. There's nothing wrong with that. The type of competition I'm talking about is about a struggle for survival, greed, fighting over resources, competing to get ahead of our neighbor for selfish reasons. When we realize our oneness with not only each other but the universe, it will make more sense to share and work together in ways that benefit the collective. An enlightened society would live in harmony with nature, receiving with open hearts her gifts, using natural materials to create while recycling what we don't need back into the earth, eliminating waste. We could live according to the cycles of the sun and the moon, eating nutrient-dense foods grown in rich soils. We could use the power of our intention, combined with compassionate action and innovative problem solving, to clean the planet and restore her springs, rivers, and oceans to vibrant health. We could live in communities of interdependence, where each of us knows our worth and contributes according to our skill and gives joyfully, where the things that humans need to thrive, species-appropriate food, clean water, sunlight, community, emotional support, energy, healthcare are all accessible. And so we work to be of service because we want to contribute rather than an effort to survive. Education, in addition to the pursuit of knowledge, would also center around spiritual awareness, empathy, and holistic knowledge. The spiritual awareness and the mental and emotional health of each individual would be a high priority and would be greatly enhanced. This would lead to a natural outpouring of abundance and prosperity for all. Creativity and innovation would flourish as each individual would be respected and supported in their contributions. Because of these things, we wouldn't have children growing up in poverty, neglect, abuse, trauma, etc. People would grow up spiritually aware, in harmony with each other and with nature, emotionally aware and healthy, mentally clear and healthy. We would likely reach a point where crime is incredibly rare, and if and when justice is needed, there would be a focus on restorative justice. Healthcare would combine the best of all worlds, all known modalities, including the strengths of both Western and Eastern medicine, as well as a greater and greater shift towards energy healing modalities. We would likely reach a point where disease in the body is incredibly rare and can be corrected easily through energy work. Our expanded awareness would eventually contribute to greater psychic abilities. We could use the power of our intention to grow our food, calm the weather, and heal any imbalances that may arise in the body. The only way that this works is if we arrive here through the path of spiritual evolution and free will choice, rather than government control. A system like this has never worked when there's a power enforcing it because the power always ends up corrupt. Instead, we as humans have to create these systems on our own. And there's a couple of different ways that this can go. First, like I mentioned earlier, we could have an overnight awakening if each person was to do the inner work to become enlightened very quickly. We could have an overnight transformation of the world. The more likely path is that it will be a process. But that process, according to near-death experiencers who have seen the future is always in flux and is responding to our present moment choices. So we can continually improve the timeline and make it more smooth and easy by the choices that we are making today. What will happen through a slower evolution of consciousness is that people little by little are doing the work, little by little they're waking up, little by little they are healing their imbalances, they're becoming aware of the truth of oneness, and little by little we'll see that reflected in society. We will see corruption rooted out. It may start by seeing that we're voting people into office who are a little bit more conscious, who are not going to put up with the corruption in the government, who are going to start clearing out some of the systems of control that have been in place. We might see people still having a lot of arguments and disagreements, but on both sides, we're having more and more conscious points that we're making. Like one side might be arguing about getting rid of government corruption, and one side might be arguing about equality. And we both have valid points that need to be made and heard, but we're arguing about those things instead of, say, what's going to benefit me? What's going to benefit me in my little world? That's kind of what I saw in this most recent election that we had. The strongest voices that I heard arguing were about, on one side, getting rid of government corruption, and on the other side, it was about equal rights and democracy. And both of those things are incredibly important, and both of those things are things that a more enlightened society would care about. So I think that there are signs that we are heading in the right direction. And the more conscious each one of us can become, the more smooth and quickly this transformation of society will take place. So I want to leave you with 3 points, 3 practical takeaways that each one of us can do right now to contribute to the collective evolution in consciousness from 3rd to 4th density. Number 1 is each one of us can work on our own individual spiritual evolution. Not everybody on the planet is going to be doing this. Not everybody on the planet is at a level of awareness where they're going to say, okay, let me work on my evolution. Let me work on forgiving myself and forgiving others. Let me work on evolving so that I can experience oneness. So those of us that are aware of this, that are watching this video and others like it, we need to be the ones to do it. Because every person that attains a higher level of consciousness makes that blueprint available for the collective and makes it more likely that other people will also become awakened. So the best gift that you can give to the collective is to work on your own spiritual evolution. Number 2, make love your neighbor as yourself the highest value in your life. The more that we can embody the truth of divine oneness, the more we express it to others, the more they experience that truth through us, and the more likely they will be awakened to that reality themselves. A simple act of love and service is the most powerful act can contribute to society, and it has a ripple effect that reaches literally around the world. I've talked about this in depth in my video here, so click on it if you want to see how powerful one act of love and service is. And 3, create and hold this vision. Create and hold a vision of what it is possible for us to create, what society could look like. We need a group of people holding a strong vision to support this process along. If you would like to join a safe and supportive space to grow in spiritual healing and evolution and connect with others who are on this journey, I'm offering my community group, Love Covered Life Sanctuary, for as low as $2.50 a month. I've restructured the tiers after receiving all of your feedback to make it far more affordable for people. So you can actually pay what you choose, but the lowest option is $2.50 a month. I just want to make this available to people, and I don't want spiritual support and information to be behind a paywall that nobody can afford. I'd love to have you join us. Click here if you're interested. Thank you for watching.